our SEAC meeting for Thursday, February 6, 2025. I'll begin with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, live, and learn. And now move on to our Indigenous Rights and Human Rights Statement. The Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subjected to actions with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to providing learning and working environments that center human rights and equity, are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from all forms of discrimination, oppression, harassment, and harm. Okay, we will move on to our roll call. We have no regrets for this evening. So we'll begin our roll call. Go ahead.
Michelle Arsenal, DDSB, Safety Trustee. Spencer Renette Burrell, Office of Ontario.
Elizabeth Daniel, Member at Large.
Jessica Wells, Member at Large. Lisa Ray, Durham Secondary Administrators Representative.
Kelly Miller, DDSB Trustee for Ajax.
Donna Edwards, Trustee for Ajax. Jen McLaughlin, Council Black. Ruth Savannah.
Melissa Cook, Durham Elementary School Administrator Representative.
Tara Foley, Durham Young Citizens Association.
Joe Reilly, Principal of the Cycles.
Allison Ingram, Easter Seals.
Dylan Jarvis, Learning Disability Association, Durham Region.
Connor Jenkinson, System Lead with Inclusive Student Services, DDSB.
Lisa Ryan, Reporting Secretary.
Andrew McCauley, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services.
Charmaine Brown, Interior Parents of Newly Impaired Children.
Eva Kyriakis, Association for Bright Children, and SEAC Chair. Okay, moving on to approval for the agenda. Before we approve the agenda, there's a couple of additions I'd like to make. First one is I'd like to make an addition under 10, business arising from the minutes. Not really business arising from minutes, but it is work. The Ministry Advisory Committee on Special Education's feedback form. We want to discuss that as 10B. And the other item would be to add on a letter that the Ottawa Catholic School Board is now proposing for SEAC chairs to sign on to, a review of that under correspondence. Does anybody have any questions or concerns with those two additions? Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Yeah, Donna, second Tara, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. All right, approval of the minutes from the January 9th, 2025 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes? And is there any questions or concerns with respect to those minutes? We get a motion to approve. Sean? Any seconders? Tara, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. All right, we will move on then to the staff report, starting with the Inclusive Student Services Impact Update.
Perfect. So wanted to highlight our 5th issue of our impact updates that we are putting out monthly, which is our work education version of this one. So this particular one highlights some of the work that is happening through our system, where we focus on, again, some of that work education, that embedded community works, embedded work skills, employability skills that are often found within our PLP classroom, and definitely are a major component of our transition to work program. Currently, we have approximately 39 students engaging in work education through our PLP, our practical learning program classroom, and we have 50 students engaged through our transition to work programs. As you would see throughout that impact update, it's a very scaffolded approach to the way that students are supported, moving from in-class support to in-school experiences and then look into some of those community-based experiences as well. And it's scaffolded throughout the entire process, making sure the students are going to be successful, feel successful as they move through that as well. Because the end goal is often really those employability skills of being able to transition into the world of work. And we are actually happy to be able to say that last year, we had 13 students throughout the process move into paid employment afterward. We had 2 move into post-secondary programs, as well as 2 move into community support systems and community support programs as well. And in addition, a nice little nugget is that within the current school year, we've had 2 students who have already moved into paid employment out of the community as well. So that's a pretty big highlight for us. Another major component of that, as I know SEAC table has definitely explored 2 different times, is those connections around transit and developing some of those transit skills throughout. Everything and that is a major component because for a lot of our students, that is how they are going to be getting to placement and to school. And it's an important skill as we move into the world as well. So along those lines, we had our fabulous transition to our team, our work education team, present at board this past week on Monday. And anybody who wants to see some of that, because they will sum up in far better words and with greater eloquence than I could around it. Please have a look at that particular board presentation, and we'll be happy to be able to provide that in the minutes and be able to send out that as well around that. Highlighting as well that we wanted to look at our transition planning guide. This was part of the presentation that was created as well. You have it as part of the SEAC package as well. And what you'll notice is it's a really detailed, easy access guide that is designed for families, that's designed for students, and is designed to be able to scaffold some of that work that has been done, be able to scaffold some of those components. So even as looking at when we are 14 and 15 years old, what should we be looking at even from our social insurance number, health card, passports, opening a bank account, all some of those considerations as well. And then moving into the next components of DSO applications, so Developmental Services Ontario applications. And again, it just continues through there. And in the digital versions, you'll see that it looks at precisely like they are in terms of some of that as well. It's a community support document and one that actually we're pretty proud of in the department, and that team has done a really fantastic job and has put a lot of work to making sure that everything is really central into supporting families and in the questions and answering some of those components that they've definitely heard from the community as well. So when you get the chance to be able to do that, do take a look at it, please. It's nice to have a paper copy, but also do look at that digital version because it's going to take you to so many different places as well. It's a great resource. That's it. Go ahead.
Thank you. I absolutely loved it. I will not lie, it's very encouraging to see so many children being able to go out into the workforce, feeling that confidence and a place for them, feeling like they have a place that they can go. Even if they have limitations or whatever, they're feeling strong and confident. So, and I hope that the numbers only grow and our community supports grow so that we can have more children in these programs. 2 questions though. One, so for example, when a child goes into the workforce industry, sometimes with the workforce, they may need a pair of special shoes, like or they may need clothing. Are we supporting them with that, or do they have somewhere where they can go for those types of supports?
So yeah, 3, we often look at how we actually going to do that. So if we're going in, I'll give you an example of a cartoon shape that we need to have steel toes.
Yeah.
So it's a one shoes to obviously fit. We want that to be part of the programming for our students as well. If students, as always, I know it's always one of your passion with like Ignite Durham, we ever need to push that as well, be able to look at any provisions. Basically, students will always be provided the safety equipment, will always have that access to the safety equipment that they need.
Certain decision process has a consumable budget to support the students, and it can go to items like that.
Fantastic. Second question is, it's lovely. It's pictures lovely. It's easy to read, not a whole bunch of things that would just confuse people. It's very, very, very user friendly, which I love. Not everything that we sometimes print out is. But I mean, I know we're in this stage where there's a lot of print and we're trying to get away from that, but there are a lot of families that would love something like, as they're getting into those 14, 15, 16 years of this to home, you know, something said, hey, mom and dad, look out for this, or can you, if we can't print this, look online, this is available, this is what, you know, little Robbie is now going to have to start accumulating for themselves, just to keep the parents and the students in loop of what could be, what they can have access to at school.
So there's a project for it. So it's part of the, one of the responsive education project funds, the envelope. So we've talked often about budget, how we get core education funding, and then we have envelopes of funding for projects. So the special education transition navigator funding, that is able to be staffing, which you see the team be a bit broader for the spring term. And we're able to use it for resources. So our intention is to provide a set of print copies to schools. Because they know their families and who accesses electronically and who accesses print and be able to do that. We have a poster coming that is the front cover of the document with the QR code that's on the back that launches to the electronic site. That has that resource plus much more about transitions. And that flyer is going to be distributed to schools to go home with all students who have intellectual or developmental disabilities within the age ranges noted. And then the one page from the guide that shows ages 14 through 21 as a single page, sorry, I gave away my guide. There's one page that shows kind of the high level all the way through. We have that out for costing poster size for student success. Lisa's got it on the other side. Thank you. So page, we don't have enough page number, page 2. The transitions pathways, thank you. We're having that source printed large for student success spaces and the special education spaces in high schools. So that it's not only for families, but also as staff learn all of those processes and work alongside the transition coordinators. It's just that visual reminder of the continuous process over multiple years and when to go back and revisit that. So we're trying to seed it and not just launch a document without embedding it into practice. Hearing you completely on the point of the usability is the magic of it, but really appreciate your comments on the guide, and we'll take those comments back to the team. They did work hard. And some of the reflections, SEAC did see a draft of this document many months ago, and hopefully you see your feedback reflected in it.
Thank you. Anybody have any other questions? Okay.
Just a kudos, but also, do you know how remarkable it is that DDSB is doing this? I'm just wondering if other boards have done anything similar to this. Certainly in Eastern Ontario, Quebec border, my hometown, I haven't heard anything about something similar like this from that board. Do you know if this is kind of groundbreaking?
So I know there is an emphasis from the ministry around that whole transition to work and looking at how we are moving students through that. So the specifics of if there is something in other districts, I'm not sure at this particular point, but it's something we can definitely, if that's a point of interest, we can definitely put out a few feelers and we all understand that.
I know that at least in one board in that part of Ontario, there's nothing like this. It's really quite delightful. I'd like to share this with people I know.
Just on that note, I know that we talk about it in the opposite table, and they're like specifically a guide like that, not necessarily. But there are other things that are happening around the transition type of work. But yes, I think I said it at the board, I'm quite proud of that, as far as, because SEAC also had input into that, and we talked about plain language all the time. And so I'm quite proud of that, and I really want to forward it on as one of the best practices towards to OSPA to say, look at, and AODA and all the stuff that's coming up, but as far as things, say, here's the best practice, it really is good.
Anybody else have any questions? Comments? Yeah, we have a couple more updates from the end. Oh, sorry. No.
I already said that I enjoyed reading it already, as well as some of my board colleagues or trustees also really liked the package. The only thing that came to my mind, and we did mention this, I was thinking about the post-secondary area, because one of my concerns is we have a lot of things that give you a heads up, like the home living section that talks about there's different ways and different choices about home living and preferences. When I'm thinking about the college and the university level, only thing my concern is, and I don't know if it would go in this guide, but just for thought, is how different programs or schools or even funding programs take into, like how they evaluate or how do they recognize disability. So for some intellectual disabilities, some kids cannot get a scholarship because it doesn't count, or it doesn't, it's case to case. So maybe it's high school or maybe in elementary, they have a diagnosis but it's not considered at a different level. So those are the things sometimes it surprise those students. It becomes alarming, like, okay, well, I got support this way, why is this different? So that's something that came to my mind, kind of what challenge, like noting that it's a case to case basis. So it might not be that what you had in your elementary or high school level will be the same in the post-secondary.
I mean, I can speak to a little bit about that, having two kids in university who have combinations in elementary school and high school, going off into university. Human Rights Commission, through their policy on special education, including universities and post-secondary. Most of the universities, or as far as I know, the universities and colleges have student accessibility offices where the kids register, but they're adults at that point, so they have to do this stuff. They have to go and register and do this stuff, and provide that information. But then the supports are provided. I'd argue that in many cases, my kids have had some better supports. Note takers, lots of support. So yeah, absolutely. So I think that stuff is there, but once they leave, kind of like this kind of helps them move into there, but once they've moved into there, it kind of moves over to those institutions, I think.
And I would add this, yeah, for sure. I did see the fact that, keeping documents to that piece, this is really good to have there, because that's part of it, is having that, because at the post-secondary level, it's a lot of independence. And then having to find your stuff. So this is really great as a guide to just be prepared for what's next.
Yeah.
There's two other updates. Apologies, this is the time of year where we start to straddle the current year and updates to you on how things are going that we made commitments for this year, but also as we start to seed and get involved with planning for next year. So one of the items that our mental health leads had talked about was student access to our regulated health professionals, particularly social work and psychological services. So there's many access points, and Carolyn, who leads one of the teams, and Sarah, who leads the other team, have been at this table and sharing their services. But we heard from students that sometimes they don't quite know what the services offer, or if it is something that would meet their needs, or what happens if they just need a quick connection over to some of our really fabulous community partners and not maybe a full consent for service. So the two teams in a couple schools last spring and a growing number of schools this fall, and then we're growing it again in spring, we launched Need to Talk. And what it is students can use a QR code to book up to a 45-minute session with a regulated health professional working for the Durham Board, so a psych or social work member, just to connect, to kind of speed date whether it's what the student needs, or could they maybe come into service, or do they just need a contact in the community. And using QR codes and posters in schools mean that they don't have to go through an adult to access booking an appointment for themselves. Again, we're in the land of secondary students. We did hear early feedback from students, again, the most valuable source of information for us, because originally the teams put the posters in really public spaces so that there would be high traffic. And what the kids told us was, please don't make me pull up my phone to snip a picture of a QR code next to Need to Talk, even though it's not identified as particularly seeking help. So we've moved these from hallways into washrooms and change rooms and quieter corridors. And we've recently updated senior team where there is tremendous support from our school leaders. Then we're getting high uptake. So where psychological services and social work are picking spaces for the Need to Talk clinic to happen, they come in on a day and book kind of in student success or guidance. Where there's great support for the space, and the space is safe for the kids. Again, we want safe way to get access, and then we want the access itself to be in a really welcoming way. We're seeing a high uptake. Where it is a little harder to find or in a more kind of awkward space, or it's not promoted as much through staff or through the student body, we're getting a lower uptake. So we're just taking a look at that as we grow it across schools. The other interesting thing to note about our Need to Talk pilot schools is that we do have a connect with a member of our mental health staff button on the DDSB website, where family members or a student can click to say, I need somebody to reach out to me. It's a non-crisis line, but it is another way of accessing. Our Need to Talk pilot schools have also had an increase in button access. So it's really interesting that when we offer multiple pathways, we see an uptake of access across all the different ways to access service. So the team's doing a really nice job. They continue to kind of refine and try and get better ways for kids to access in a way that's meaningful for the students. They are also tracking data on what the connects are doing. So what percentage are coming in to informed consent, what number are just community connections and done. We are treating it, Carolyn will describe it a little like an emergency room for how we're using data. So if a student makes an appointment and through to service, we see that as one kind of ticketing pathway. If the same student clicks, but for two different reasons. So for example, I go to the emergency room because I've had a fracture. I go to the emergency room because of another thing. We're counting that as two different points because again, honoring that at any moment in time, people have different needs at different times. So I think the team's doing a really nice job of trying to look at it very fulsomely. And yet another way that they're getting service to students. So if you hear the term Need to Talk, it is our staff in our schools on those quick connections for students. But again, if it's going to be a multi-session, then we do go through informed consent based on their colleges and bring them right into a plan of care. Our other update is that because it's February, this is when we do dive in to 25-26 school year planning. Our time that I'm in my career and saying 2026, that seemed like a long way out at one point. Now it's right there. So Connor and the team are going through a process with schools. So principals and administrators, such as the three around the table with us this evening, would have submitted student names for consideration for special education class placement. That data comes in. The team runs new registrations alongside of that. Connor and Michelle lead the process across a number of departments where we look at the location, the number, and type of our classes across the system. So as we plan for that, we just draw back into the language of our special education inclusive student services plan. Because it's also the time of year where we start revision on that plan towards our commitment. Again, ministry requires it biannually. In Durham, for transparency with community, we publish annually and take it through our board for approval with motion of board. Also appreciating that the shared leadership of the district is an inclusive model of education. And so that brings this table through our department, centering students and families. And then it is a motion of board that approves our plan and moves it to the ministry. So we do that with transparency. So just drawing on some language that's in the plan publicly facing that we will be maintaining this year through next. So we know that in March 2018, growing timeline previous, the Ontario Human Rights Commission released their policy on accessible education. And so we drew a few quotes from that document directly into our plan in terms of education needing to engage a process to address barriers in education that would otherwise prevent students with disabilities from having equal opportunities, access, and benefits. And we really take that to heart in our department in terms of growing inclusion and accessibility. Also in standard 2, so that's at the beginning, the board's general model of special education, that our ongoing commitment is to provide structures and supports to each student to nurture their growth development in ways that respect dignity, maximize participation, foster integration and independence as identified for each student individually, and I think that's really important. And so you will see between our current year plan and our next year plan, consistency on all of those values. And you see that coming through our teaching and learning team as they talk about universal design. You see it through our team as we plan for students. Specific to our placement programs, we moved to standard 9. So kind of the standards or chapters for those that are less familiar with our special education plan. So standard 2 is kind of the board's general model. Standard 9 gets into special education placements. So the language there is that the Durham board provides a range of differentiated placement and programs, interventions, and individual accommodations. Again, echoing the language and the commitment for participation, integration, and independence, enabling meaningful access to education, supports, and student success. So that theme of inclusion, independence as individually defined for our students remains thorough. We know that lined up with that commitment, and again, we echo it as a district, and it is within the Education Act itself, that the IPRC, so a placement of a student, does require consideration of regular class placement first as the most inclusive placement for students, and then moves into consideration for special education placements where appropriate. As a board, we understand our model is based on a range of placements and programs, and we continue that into the 25-26 school year. We are in early planning, and we will share with you as soon as we are able. But we are projecting a fairly either status quo count of special education classes and or slight flux as we look at also adding 2 new elementary schools to the district and looking at the needs of students across the district as we grow. Within that, there is always minor tweaks to locations. So where we see students, we kind of take a 3 to 5 year projection and try and get kids in or nearest home school community for the majority of kids accessing a program. We do try and have programs such as practical learning that tend to be long-term pathways in the same elementary school for our younger students through to secondary to minimize transitions for students. And then we have programs that are more intervention-based or short-term where kids are coming in or out for 1 or 2 years. They tend to be the single locations. We also know at this point too, we do have a disproportional number of our students who identify as intellectually gifted within the program itself. And so that's a signal for us that we do need to do a better job of providing regular class as an option, supporting gifted learners for families to have choice. But at this time we do have quite a number of classes, 36. And so we are anticipating, we are still in the testing process, but that the number of gifted classes having grown over both of the last 2 school years would be stable this June to September and following through that process. So overall, we're about status quo. The deaf, hard of hearing program does remain on pause. We have brought you updates a couple times on the research that we are doing with Western universities, not Western University, but Western Canada universities. And we are pleased that we are about to move into the interview phase with families and students, with the university teams coming out to conduct those interviews. So again, that research was, we had inquiry on how we can best support learners who identify as deaf, hard of hearing and are members of the deaf community, especially when curriculum such as literacy curriculum is heavily focused on oral language. And what happens if that is not your language system? The university partners wanted to do research into deaf education and needed a good, strong population to be able to do that. So the partnership, it has been an incredible journey of learning in terms of research tools that can access ASL, because again, most of the research tools that universities use, Allison, not to speak about your world, largely record dictation of interviews. And so how does that translate to a visual language? And so lots of learning along the way that has actually informed some of the services. Michelle's been able to bring those early feedback through the team. But until we can say that there's a really strong outcomes program, we have paused it again for next year, serving the students either in alternate placements, including regular class, and or in other placements. And then we look forward to bringing those research results when we have them next year. So largely status quo, but we will be continuing the language and the commitments of our special education plan. And then the last one in your package is that the section on SEAC is in your handouts this evening. We are asking that between this meeting and the next one, that each SEAC member take a read through that. It is timestamped from last June. So because our special education plan is published after a motion from board, we do not update the plan through the year, but do so on an annual basis. So if there is something that appears timestamped in terms of the partnerships or the representation around the table, it is, because it is timestamped, the website information is pure and accurate and is a living document, but the special education plan remains annual within the June timeframe each year. And that's our update on that. Sorry, that's a lot between Connor and I, but I think important information for the table.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Andrea with respect to the class placements and the need to talk? Oh, okay, I have a couple of things with respect to the gifted, you know, looking at supporting as a true option of keeping the kids in a regular class placement. For families, having that as more of an option, because historically, that hasn't worked out particularly well. And I know there's the argument, well, you know, you can say you've got kids on either end, but the reality is that child who's very bright and just kind of gets the stuff and moves on, they're not, the enrichment for them is not a priority, is trying to get the child who's below lifted up. So in all fairness, right? So that's where those kids kind of fall by the wayside, become either the, you know, essentially an A class EA, right, where they're asked to help and teach other kids, which can sometimes put them in a position of being seen as teacher's pet, being seen as where it encourages bullying around them, and we've seen that time and time again in mainstream classroom. So how are we going to ensure, you know, if we're going to cap those, how are we going to actually ensure that the enrichment that they're entitled to is actually going to be received? Because that's been the problem all along. It's very hard to, one thing to enrich a group of 25 children, but it's hard to take one child on a field trip, or it's hard to instead of making it more work and having somebody understand, because that's the thing with gifted teachers, is they understand the difference between enrichment and curriculum, right? Because they're not supposed to be held to a higher standard, right? So they're tested on the curriculum, but they're given the enrichment to allow them to go deeper and broader. And that takes a special understanding of what that looks like and how to do that without making it more work, which is why the gifted program has been very popular for the kids to go into. And right now, it's my understanding, our gifted facilitators are 0.5. So if we're going to be making that a true option, how do they fully support in class those teachers who are, you know, teaching kids below grade level and kids above grade level, supporting them to do that?
So I think there's a few things in there. One is valuing all of the students who require differentiation, which is quite broad within classrooms. And so I think we mean also there's multi-layers as we support any learners. So our teaching and learning team is attuned to this in terms of the work we're doing around humanizing learning environment, individualizing experiences for kids, bringing up universal design. A classroom that has a strong UDL practice is able to do just this, because there are 20 primary plans or 30 junior plans for students. In terms of the supports, I would say we experience a bit more inconsistency within the program than it being consistently supporting of all learners. So I think it's the yes and of the work we need to do within the program and within the regular class. And so that's where we're also, because of it being cognitively based at this time, by definition, we're looking at expanding it in terms of Ritzuli's model, where we look at interest and task completion, and bringing that and how the learners need their structures. Because as you said, it's not more and it's not helping, it's interest based. And so that's where we're looking at a portfolio within one of our managers of psych services, because it is about that cognitive understanding coming alongside the facilitator in doing teacher education. And I also think when we look overall at all students, particularly those with intellectual giftedness, on the need for global competency skills and connections outside of the four walls of the classroom, we know we need to do a better job inside our department of bringing those opportunities to the system. All teachers, those both in regular class, and I think amplifying that for the teachers within the program itself. So we've done a lot of reflecting on the cohort of learners in terms of how we can better serve learners who are under this category of exceptionality.
Right, because I know it's been my experience and heard from many parents who initially try to keep their kids in a mainstream classroom, that they don't hear about the gifted events, they don't get invited to the gifted events.
We know we've got room to grow on that.
Yeah, and so that's the concern, and the other thing is how you then try to manage that within the school itself, because right now, you know, if you've got 3 grade 1 classes, or 3 grade 4 classes, for example, you know, we're talking 2%. So if you've got 100 kids in grade 4 in a school, you might have 2. They might not be friends, or they might not be in the same class. So we have to really look at that, right? Because one of the biggest reasons that parents choose to move their kids into the gifted program is the social and emotional well-being of their kids, and having that connection where they're with people who think like them, talk like them, act like them. And I know that both of my kids were reluctant to go, you know, just speaking from personal experience. And within a week of them being there, they wouldn't have gone back. So we have to really think about this and how well it's done within the schools, because these kids are at high risk for getting frustrated with school and walking away early for that reason.
So we'll continue to bring updates from SEAC.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns? Okay, then we're going to move on then to number 8, the board report.
Yeah, I mean, we did have a really great presentation on the transition, you know, like beyond high school transition plan, and that it was very, very well received. But one of the things that I really would like to highlight, because it's a comment I made to people, to all the people that were presenting, but in the report, it actually has some statistics around, in basically November 2024, community living in Ontario reported over 50,000 adults with developmental or intellectual disabilities are waiting to access developmental services in Ontario. Of note, more than 30,000 people are waiting for community participation supports, and 12,000 people are waiting for employment supports. And what I can honestly say that they're probably understated numbers, because we know many people that have just given up. And also, you know, and honestly, the supports and services are dwindling. The community agencies are impacted by the lack of funds themselves, and so forth. So, you know, this program that we have, and the fact that some of the successes that you brought forward is really, really crucial, because it gives this group of students and a foot up among some of those people that graduated before this all was happening. So it's really a phenomenal program, and I, you know, will continue to support, because it is mentioned that we supplement the people supporting this. Again, as part of the SPEC budget, we supplement it. And we continue to support it, because it does, it shows student success. So that was really one of the key things that, as far as the board was concerned. The other thing I think that was really interesting, because it was brought up, is the student trustee report, that they are looking at, transportation from a regional transportation from a student perspective. So they've done some preliminary surveys and so forth, and they'll be coming back. But basically, they have identified very clearly that they wanted some of the issues. Basically, they need improved accessibility, particularly in rural, less dense populated regions. lower fares and expanded routes. They talked particularly about Oshawa to increase the affordability and availability of transportation for students. Enhanced accessibility for students with disabilities, so they do mention that as well. And educational opportunities, and it's really interesting because we have these opportunities for our students, workplace program to actually go through training as far as using public transit. They're actually asking education opportunities to ensure students understand how to use public transit safely and effectively. So I mean, that's kind of interesting from the student trustees perspective, and I thought that was, it really marries into some of the things that we're doing for our students. The other thing I wanted to bring attention to was that, of course, I had mentioned that at the last meeting that we were public education officers, public education symposium was happening, and many of us of the trustees did participate in a lot of the workshops. But there was 2 workshops, and I mentioned that David Leposki was going to be doing a presentation, and I worked with David on the K to 12, and I really didn't realize that he actually has written his own memoir. And the memoir is actually called Swimming Up Niagara Falls, The Battle to Get Disability Rights Added to the Canadian Charter of Rights. And it was interesting because he talked about his journey, basically his journey through the education system, but also then at the end gave 5 key points of what he thought school boards could do around supporting kids with special needs and within school. And one of the things he talked about was providing 1-page or small documents with plain language too. And so there was a couple of things that he talked about. So I was kind of saying that, oh, we do that now, we do this part now. So we were doing part of that from my board, our board's perspective. But the book is available free online. If you wanted a printed copy, it's $17. He doesn't take any royalties, but I'm just going to read you a bit about the abstract. I think it's really kind of cool. It says, this is the personal memoir of a blind lawyer and a volunteer disability rights advocate, David Leposki. It describes his involvement in a perspective on the successful fight from 1980 to 1982 to get Canada's proposed Charter of Rights amended to guarantee equal rights for people with disabilities. This memoir recounts the little-known saga of the disability amendment to the Charter. Few know that equality for people with disabilities was the only constitutional right added to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms during the widely publicized 18-month battle over the patriation of Canadian Constitution from October 1980 to April 1982. It is aimed at anyone interested in disability rights, human rights, Canadian political or legal history, social justice, advocacy, and Canadian constitutional law. It provides a mix of legal and legislative history, personal autobiography, grassroots advocacy strategies, and reflective commentary on lessons learned. And it really is, it has a real sense of humor. It's in there. It's a really good read. I started reading it and I couldn't put it down. I forwarded the link and I will forward the link through here. But I think it's a really, really interesting read as far as that's concerned. And it went over very well. And got really good reviews. So it's something to think about because it's a person with lived experience. He started off with very low vision and he did become blind. The interesting part was when he was advocating for this, he was 23 years old and he was blind at that point in time. But he also talks about his journey around, he did not know Braille, and to this day he says he's not really proficient in Braille. He basically uses a lot of other devices. He's an amazing individual, but it's that lived experience that is really impressive when the person is giving their talk. The other thing was that, I attended, another session, and I thought it was really cool because it came out, it was problem solving framework for navigating tension, workshop. And you learned, and it was a tool called the Pro charting strategy that it used for navigating different, so it really charted down. We were given an example where we listed only the positives of each of the things. And that way you actually listen to people on what their benefits, why they thought that that way was the better way. And so you could actually listen, and it, never mind saying to think about the negative parts. And so it was really a really good tool that we didn't get into because it was, you know, a 45-minute workshop. But apparently the Toronto District School Board is using it, has been starting to use it and introduce it to their students. So it was a really interesting thing, because I thought that, you know, a lot of times when we're discussing and trying to overcome barriers, we often have a way of, you know, thinking one way, and this is where it opens the box for that discussion. So I thought it was a really cool too. The other thing we noted is that the Ontario Autism Coalition released a report dealing with results of their special education survey conducted in the spring of 2024. And again, that data basically survey data that showed that special education system is not meeting the needs of a huge number of kids it is meant to educate. And then School Mental Health Ontario launched By Your Side, a new parent caregiver learning hub that has been designed to meet the needs of Ontario families. It contains resources and supports in multiple formats to ensure that families can easily access information and strategies to promote mental health and well-being at home. So I thought those are two things that, as far as, and we can provide the links for those.
John, any questions with respect to the board report? I don't. Okay. Moving on then to a presentation, discussion on school-based consultation sessions with our guest, Principal Joe Wrigley from Lakeside Public Schools. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joe, pronouns he, him, and I'm the proud principal of Lakeside Public School in South Ajax, where I work alongside a number of wonderful families and parents as members and partners of the school community. So thank you so much for inviting me out and having the opportunity to share a little bit about what we are calling a listening session at Lakeside to support parent advocacy. So just to give you kind of a bit of an overview, on the evening of November 20th, Lakeside, in collaboration with SEAC, hosted a listening session to focus on helping families navigate and advocate for their child or children by understanding their lived experiences within our school system. As we were talking together, we really came to three main goals or outcomes that we wanted for the session. The first one was to help raise the profile of SEAC and the great work that everyone here around the table is doing to the local Lakeside parent and family community. Not only to make them aware of the work that you're doing, but also to encourage them and potentially have those who want to come in and be more involved in the work that's happening here. Secondly, it really was focused on supporting families, and we wanted, I would say that we wanted those who came to the session, sat around the table, to leave that session feeling more confident in being able to navigate and advocate for their child within the school system. And we really felt that the best way to do that was to engage in the listening session, to hear from families, hear from parents, to hear from guardians and caregivers, to understand their experiences in navigating that school system or our school system. I would say that the impact of this session, very high level, was that it did strengthen the relationships between families and the school. I think that was done through not only demonstrating improved communication, breaking down barriers to communication, but also being responsive and building trust, that everyone who came to the session left the session feeling that they got something from it. And that it allowed for those more, maybe comfortable to be able to come to the school or to talk to anyone, myself included, about ways that they can advocate. And I think it was paraphrased here. I'll paraphrase a quote directly from parents who we got feedback from. And it was that the session gave an opportunity to learn from the experiences of others who have traveled this path before. And before I talk a little bit about next steps, I think that what Donna just shared, the pathway of that stuff, the gentleman whose name I've forgotten, but going up the Niagara Falls and hearing that, when you shared your story, your path, I could see everyone around the table. There was a sense of like relief that they felt that it was okay and that they felt that they weren't alone. And you could see it. And I know sometimes there was people who were tearing up, right, at different times, right? I mean, maybe myself included too a little bit, right? But you know, that was tissues. But it was yeah, you really saw that, and I think that having people here and know that they're not alone on those pathways. From some of the feedback, now obviously very high level to respect the privacy of those who were there, integrity of the process. But I think that so many people felt a sense of questioning themselves as to whether they were doing enough and wondering if, you know, feeling almost a sense of guilt, maybe not knowing how to navigate the system completely. And so having that group and very localized at the school level and really to the school community in the sense of we're all part of the same village really was, I think, was quite powerful. And that's what thank you. That's what we've heard from the feedback. Yeah. This part, is there anything?
I think I sort of had, when I did the debrief, I think in December, about that it really, it evolved, it was very organic. Like it was that whole conversation, it was a group of people around the table, we started introducing ourselves, and then the conversation just spread. And it was like we had parents who were just starting the journey, and we had parents who had done it 27 times, and they had so many things to offer, and you could almost see palpably, like visibly, that the parents who were new to this were, oh, okay, it's gonna be okay. I have people I can talk to now, and I said, oh, okay, I got you. You need to talk to that person and this person, and I'm like, I threw Rowan under the bus 4 times, and you know, in a good way, and so you know, here we have people all around this table, and you know, and that sort of thing. So it was all of a sudden there was this opening of, I have places to go if I don't know what to do. I'm not by myself, and that I think was fantastic, because then you also have the other parents who are like, I got you, girl, it's okay, we got you, you know, and that, so it was that sense of community. So it was building a new community within Lakeside specifically that I saw, which was really cool. And I think that needs to happen through more schools, because again, you do get those different experiences. The work that we see here, and then the policies and the things and all the ideas that happen here, you sometimes don't see them translate down at the individual school level, doing, you know, various different factors. This is a way to help. And you know, that's how we're talking about, how do we help parents become part of the team and feel that they know what they can go to and that who they can turn to, and how do they have those collaborative conversations versus a combative one. And it became so collaborative. I think there was some really good feedback. I think 2 or 3 points that you've written down in terms of actual, that's a really good point. I think we need to have those conversations. So it was a very, really positive experience. It was, people felt seen, people felt heard, and that means so much, especially like you said earlier, building that trust and that rapport, that now all of a sudden becomes a much better school environment for the parents, that they now feel that they can come to Joe if something's not working, and now there's that conversation and it becomes us, not us and them. And that's what I got out of it.
And if I can build on that, one of the pieces of feedback that we heard was that oftentimes it can feel, you know, it's very structural, very almost like mechanical, and all the pieces that go into an organization as large as a school system and a school board, and that it was an attempt to change the narrative of looking at it not as cogs of a larger machine, But as we're a village, we're together as a community, a part of a number of other communities across Durham, creating that larger sense of community togetherness as well. And in terms of next steps, as to how we've actioned that information, as you mentioned, there were some very actionable items that came out that we can take back to staff, and have them not only just be made aware of sort of the perceptions that may be there, but also how can we improve the lived experiences of those who interact with the school system? So how can we provide the best line of service? Like how can we provide the best service to the families and students that are part of our wonderful Lakeside community? So I believe that that's everything that I brought to share, but I'm happy to answer any questions or. We're happy to answer.
Donna? I'm just wondering because, I mean, I'm so glad that it happened because I think I've been pushing it for the long time around the table of having at least even trying to have a wrap on each school community council, you know, as far as having somebody that is familiar with, you know, some of the processes around, you know, navigating the education system for the child with a disability. And so this is really, really heartwarming to hear. And I'm just wondering, is that, do you see a way of enlarging it to maybe workshop at a PIC, through PIC, or even a regional, because I know the last time our regional SECs were actually broken up into smaller groups. So if you see a way of moving this, you know, to a larger scale in order to get and still have that, you know, wholesome, you know, heartfelt conversations.
So to take and paraphrase a comment that I heard Andrew make earlier, yes, and so yes, I think it could be very scalable, and I think that there would be a lot of buy-in from educators. I know, you know, we all get into the job because we want to make a difference in the lives of others. So this is the being able to connect with families and you know, as we talk about humanizing the environment, coming alongside and working in partnership and getting to know people's stories and really understanding lived experiences. That's what motivates us to do the jobs that we do. So I feel that administrators, educators from the school perspective would be very interested. And sometimes it just takes either an example or giving permission with the idea, or yes, we can invite people in and we can talk to them. And we can sit around a table and have coffee and conversations, right? And be intentional. And it's okay. And I think I mentioned, you know, it's okay to say things that you're worried about might hurt my feelings. It's not right. It's okay. If we're going to be really honest with each other, we're going to make real meaningful difference. We have to be able to hear things that may be uncomfortable. But if we don't hear those things, we can't come to them. We're all trying to do the best that we can. And so, so on roundabout way, yes, I think it is scalable. And yes, I think people would be interested.
I think one of the things as the two of you were sharing, so thank you very much again for doing that and for sharing it here at this table as well. So we have a communication that goes out bi-weekly to all of the certs in terms of just information in timely ways, suggestions. We embed professional learning in it. And so as you were speaking, one of the things I wondered about is if the two of you would co-author just kind of a paragraph or two on what you did and what you did. And that we can put it in the cert e-bulletin, share that out, because I think you would naturally do that with the lessons learned from the conversation, which is wonderful. And for us, we'll front end it with a sentence around the connection, because it does link to, Charmaine, I'm gonna point behind your head, sorry, I'm gonna look like I'm pointing at you, and it's, so you see the multi-year strategic plan, the graphic, sitting in the window right now. And when I think about connected communities, I think this is a really great way to bring that strategic plan to life in a way of fostering inclusion. So now we're touching on well-being and meaningful learning as well. And so what I wonder is, and you both nodded, so I'm gonna hold you to that commitment. If you can write it in kind of a paragraph or two, we'll wrap it with the NYSB unless you want to do that at the front end. So, and then what we'll do is we'll stick it in the e-bulletin, but we'll also ask them that in response, schools highlight where they're making spaces and places to bring forward parent caregiver connections and voices. In encouraging, maybe that will be a new section to the e-bulletin where we can draw some of those stories out and share, because I think success breeds success, and where you have families giving good feedback and you've got something to take back with your school team and here's how we actioned it, that cycle, people like, as you said, we all come in to make it, like, to support the success of kids and families. And so I think we could maybe spiral a regular section in the bulletin, but you'd be the inaugural entry that encourages other schools to also, because I think there's some really great practices across the district and we don't often hear about them or elevate them. So sometimes it's not about doing separate or different, but actually sharing the options for how that can occur. So we'll use you as a springboard if that's okay. And I saw Connor nodding, so this is great. Joe was writing, Connor's putting it in the bulletin. And then we'll call for other schools and bring the stories forward too. So thank you. If that. Oh.
That was awesome, and I just wanted to say that, just hearing from parents in general, I think that it's so critical, it's so crucial, because it's also a space to, unpack some of maybe even the challenges that, parents face, and also because it's a journey, and I think that, a lot of times I find parents feel, hard on themselves when something doesn't go the way they think it should go. And so in terms of what Andrew just shared about breaking barriers and inclusiveness, it's also from the parent level, because they're fighting for their kids, they're showing up for their kids. And then it allows them to feel connected, like somebody understands me. And so it creates a continuous learning. So I like that. And I think it's definitely something that we could highlight so that other schools can be encouraged to make that, a priority. And it also creates compassion. I think it's, we need to see that more so we can, break stigmas and people feel more comfortable to share what they're actually going through. Yeah.
What you just shared, Kelly, was echoed in the feedback from families. There was an element of that there's a stigma and that there might be hesitation because of that stigma of how advocacy will be perceived, and the idea of what, sometimes at a school level, fighting for your child might be seen as combative, and actually it's an advocacy. And knowing how to identify and navigate that and come alongside both fight for the child and not get caught in this combative space. So that what you echoed was echoed in or evident in things that came out of the feedback.
Yes, absolutely.
Anybody else? Yeah, Charmaine?
I want to thank you. I'm sure the parents in your community, thank you. But I want to thank you for being the leader that listens to your families, that listens to your parents, and is willing to hold space for them, because that's what that is. And holding space is different than having a meeting and bringing people together. And as you say that it was organic, the conversation was organic. It is, but that doesn't happen unless you create a space to allow the organicness to happen. So I want to thank you for recognizing that this was important, not just the parents getting together, but allowing them their voice to lead the conversation that was needed for them. And how that can be replicated, but only with the right leadership and the right mindset around what leadership looks like, and how you view parents and the value, and how you honor and value and celebrate parents and their children. So I want to thank you for that. You are doing something that would have been a huge benefit to me as a parent of two children who have special needs, and I did not receive that. So thank you for your on behalf of your community and parents if they haven't.
Anybody else have anything? Sorry, Ron?
And you sort of described what we're pretty much all feeling, a little bit there, but I remember when Tara was speaking about it several months ago, last month, and it was so organic, and as a engineer, in my mind, I'm thinking, can it be reproduced? Do you have to have the correct leader? Do you have to have the receptive audience? Can we learn from this experience in a way that we can replicate it such that, ironically, can we design system, the better word, that will lead to other groups being able to experience that level of organicness, to feel comfortable to say, you know, I want to speak that type of thing. I think it was, I can't remember when Donna was saying, can we get a larger group? And my first thought is, if it gets too big, people don't feel comfortable. And what is that number? And I think that's a process, right? That's what we figure that stuff out. But since you were in it, can you speak to what could be reproduced if you didn't have a leader that wasn't necessarily as compassionate, or somebody that wasn't, you know, as caring and wanting to share value to other people that are in that system? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. What I would first share, what first comes to my mind is that I believe that, you know, the colleagues that I know, whether it's working here in Durham, or in Thames Valley, or previously was, is that their level of passion and commitment to kids is evident. So I think that's there. I think that the educators want to do the best job they can and come to this job from a sense of, you know, service and service lens. I think we want to make that better. I think that my journey in particular allowed me to come with a skill set in that I've had the opportunity to run a number of listening sessions, focus groups, listening sessions for a variety of sizes. So I think that there might be some training that can be provided there, or some guidelines that can be provided to help navigate an effective listening session. But I believe that the core passion and the desire to do that work is there, which would allow it to be replicable. And then beyond that, a few talking points on how to run an effective or facilitate an effective listening session would be helpful there. But I think, to your point, is that from that engineering lens of we've constructed it, can we reconstruct it and scale it? I think so. I do. I'm optimistic.
And not just you.
No.
The principal at school X,
Totally.
principal at school, that type of thing. Okay. That's good to hear, because you hear stories, kind of like in the communities of, oh, we had this teacher who did this, and I'm still doing that. Oh, we had a vice principal who did X. And so there's concern, sometimes we hear it on the ground roots, but again, that sounds like very ground roots type meeting, and that's what excited me about it. To echo, thing with the Charmaine there, I really wanted to, but it was, I just love to hear that connection on every one-to-one level. Like, you know, we have a lot of systems in place to ensure that everyone gets the help they need. I remember one time, several months ago, or maybe a year ago, we were talking about how if a parent needed assistance, what do they do? And then we created that button on the page, and I thought, it's so simple. It's Staples. That was easy. But that's what we need. That's what parents need, right? That's what families need. So anytime we're able to, I don't want to say cut the red tape because it's essential, but sort of minimize the steps to getting what they need for success. Success is it's exciting. So, you know, some of the other story with parents, good night. We're doing well. We really are. So congratulations. Yeah, everybody. I'm just loving what I'm hearing.
Anybody else have anything to add?
I'm just gonna add one more thing.
Yeah.
Full kudos to Joe. Joe, this was completely Joe's idea, and as soon as he realized I was on SEAC and he started talking to us, we're gonna be best friends. And that's exactly what's happened. So as soon as he told me his idea of what he wanted to do, I'm like, I am so in, let's do this. I'm ready for this. So and it was fantastic. Like, Joe is incredibly, you know, great at being inclusive and humble and open. And like you said, this is, you know, blast me in the face if you want. If I'm not doing something right, I want to hear about it. This isn't about blame. This is about improving the process and making this better for the kids. So being able to remove yourself, it's not a personal attack. It's how do we make this better, which was great. And I talked a lot about Adam, which you all have heard multiple times, but I think that helped open, like back to the, I was, you know, I've had this experience, I actually was at Lakeside all through thing, and now Adam's doing this, and here's my ups, here's my downs, and that sort of thing, so having someone open up to start. We honestly, I don't think we really knew how it was gonna go, so like, we had sort of planned some open-ended questions, just in case it was a really quiet group, and then I just, nope, gone, and we just let them go, because that, and that's how we like, we recognize that that to be how you replicate that, you just recognize they're gonna go, let them go, like that's the whole point, and then we asked a couple of, well, that's an interesting point, blah, 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 and then try to just kind of funnel it back into some of those items to action it and that kind of stuff, so it's like active listening and that kind of stuff, some of those skills, I think that's what kind of really made it a great night, and we weren't sure it was gonna last, but we started at 6:30, it was going, and it went like that, 2 hours without even blinking, well, oh wow, we could probably go for another hour, hour and a half, easy, like parents are just going, but you know, everyone's gotta go home, school night, you know, that kind of thing, but that was, you know, that I think was really cool. Someone, was it that asked about whether or not we could include, you know, schools like Devon's, or if that was been a,
Yes,
we got 2 or 3 schools together in close proximity, that could have happened. We'll try this, see what happens, we can do it again next time and see if they get bigger, so we'll do that.
I would just like to add, there's a couple of things that stood out to me. I know as a parent, I was always pretty open about my kids' diagnosis and right identifications, and because both my kids are multiple exceptionalities. And being open about having, with that information, had parents then saying, you know, coming to me, starting to come to me, and the teachers knew I was fine as well, where they would say, you know, go talk to so-and-so's mom, okay? Go talk to her, because she's got, you know, a lot of knowledge, and in doing that, it made it okay for them to talk about it, and that's what this space did as well, right? So parents building on each other's knowledge and you know, sort of experiences, and I remember standing in Walmart for 3 hours one day having a conversation with a mom that I ran into. And we kind of joked that we should have just gone to a coffee shop at that point. But then we had to go pick the kids up. But those things are really important spaces to have, right? But it does bring me back to the idea of, and this is where things sort of start. Somebody has an idea like this, a really good idea, and they implement it, it goes very well. And sharing that sort of broader, it takes me to when Martine Robinson did the bring your parents to school days, right? And how it went over phenomenal with it. And then I remember going over and meeting her when my kids were at AG Bell, and having that discussion with her on how they did it, how they planned it and all of that, and implementing it, and how well that went over and was received. So it can be broadened out if people are willing to go in and have a conversation about how did how did that work, right? And you know, and that's the discussion, you know, those sort of discussions over coffee type thing are those open-ended, where you don't have a set agenda, you just have a few maybe things you throw out, and you're facilitating that conversation, and it will flow. I think it's fantastic. So I mean, I guess my suggestion for one way is, I know principals every so often get together and they meet for things. That's another place where it could be thrown out. Hey, I did this, and this is how it was received, and sort of just putting that little seed for thought to. So, okay, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and you coming and spending it with us on this wintry night. Yeah. Okay, we are going to move on then to our business rising from the minutes, our draft parents SEAC survey, the caregiver survey. It was sent out in Word form as well as in links, so that you could go in and try the link. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it and whether or not they want to make any changes or revisions to it as it stands. Does anybody want a refresher on what we changed from the last time?
Yes,
Okay.
no one else gets stuff.
You're honest. Thank you for your honesty.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, yes.
So thank you so much to SEAC. So I think last month we had a fairly robust conversation about the survey. And Leslie took away your feedback. And so there was agreement to use the base of the 2023 survey to repeat measures to evaluate impact. But that we also wanted to expand it to give some room in terms of experience. I believe it was Elizabeth that suggested that we loop back in the preamble to share back what we heard in 2023 and what we did with that in order to encourage participation in this survey. So the front end was updated. We have changed the title. Oh, it should be Communication Plus in the title, so we'll catch that. We truncated the open-ended questions around the what 3 things are working well and what are 3 things that we can improve on. In the 2023 version, those stated in relation to communication. And so it was in agreement and the recommendations from a couple of associations that those were just left open-ended so families could catch the theme that they wanted to. We also added that if they answered that they were very familiar or somewhat familiar with the IPRC guide, there's a dig in that says, what about the document was helpful to you? And if they answered no, it is what additional information would be helpful. We did have a wonder around number 13 and the categories of exceptionality or expression of disability. My direction to the team was to align it with the language of our student census and our staff census that has taken a more neuroaffirmative approach and a more identity-based approach to disability. And also to where we see a list replicate itself, we're better able to congregate data across different surveys. So we would be able to do that a bit better. So I hope that's okay. And that's for feedback of SEAC, but where you see that list updated, it is now consistent. And you will see that the Positives for Climate Wellbeing Survey is being administered this year as well. We've replicated the list as well, and our Human Rights Advisor and myself had influence on that list. So we chose to go that way. And then the other feedback from SEAC was around secondary families in secondary school and feedback. And so there was interest from SEAC in getting feedback from grade 9-10 families and grade 11-12 families. And so Leslie has written the intuitiveness into the background that if a family clicks that their child is in one of those grades, that it then has the logic built in that it drives to some other questions. And that was what we took as a summary of feedback from SEAC last month, and Leslie's put that into what you see in front of you this evening.
Yeah, I totally agree with changing the categories. I mean, as far as that's concerned, I was really pleased to see that. You know, for multiple reasons, but you know, you've stated them very quite clearly as far as especially if you want to start looking at cross-referencing data. It's really crucial to look at SEAC, but it's also very positive. So I appreciate that. And I think I didn't have a chance to actually try it out. I tried it, I'll tell you one thing, I tried to pull up the Word document on my iPad, my very old iPad, and it wouldn't open it up. Okay, even though I have access to Word or whatever, it just wouldn't open. So just a caution when it comes to, you know, depending on how they might pull it up, it did not work. Okay, and I know you probably won't be using it in Word anyway. But just a caution, you know, that it does work on full technology too.
Actually, though, Donna, to that point, I will say that when I pulled it up, I flipped it to myself at work because I don't have Word on my iPad. and opened it up there, and I got a funny error message. It did end up opening for, not the first time, the second time it opened, but I got this funny message. But it did open, I was able to print it, so I don't know if there's something, the document itself may have some corruption in it.
I think it was the graphics, because I saw the error message on right, I don't think it's the graphics at the
Yeah.
top where it just cautions around, just gets so many things to be amended for graphics, so.
Yeah, and our firm's pretty strict with that type of thing, so it's, yeah, okay, so that's probably why, but.
I'll be short. I like, what Andrew presented about the follow-up to the question, to go a little bit further, so if they, found a service or something wasn't, there was like a space to kind of go a bit further and say why. I think that's really important, so we're just getting a little bit more understanding of what parents are saying.
Anybody else?
I just had a question about number 10, where we invite them to either move on to the IPRC questions or not. Is that what was done historically? I'm just wondering about the rationale for offering them the choice.
So the reason is we want some sort of basic information for sure, but some parents only have a minute kind of thing. So we want to give them options to have an off ramp if they choose to. I think most people don't once they start, but it just gives parents an option to kind of exit out without losing everything if they don't want to continue and answer more detailed stuff. So that's why.
There's still some valuable information in the previous questions.
Yeah.
That makes it worthwhile. Thank you.
Yeah, we struggled for a long time with getting parents to answer to the survey because it tended to get pretty long.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we were having that discussion saying that a lot of parents, I mean, they're lucky to have 5 minutes. So if we wanna value that if they to get any feedback we can. So that's rational. Anything else? I guess the big question would be, do we go with a list from 2023? Or do we go with option B, the list that is on school climate and well-being survey? Yeah, number 19 and number 20. I guess I show of hands who want to stay with 19. I'm gonna say that's a show of hands from everybody. They want to move to 20. Yeah, I think it makes more sense. I think the more options you give parents, the better that is, right? And also like consistency. Yeah, I like the consistency as well. Yeah. And across platforms, yeah, for sure.
Also, my kids would move from having a check mark in 19 to being a no in 20, so it seems odd. Yeah.
So I will,
Just thinking as a parent.
are we missing one?
Because I would choose gifted in 19, but then I.
Oh yeah, gifted is not, can we add that? I guess you can add their disability, or, well, I guess it's
Choose
not,
no of needs, I guess, but it seems like it's missing
I mean,
an option for that piece of.
yeah,
We can put them as brackets to intellectual disability. That's where we,
yeah,
it's under the ministry category of intellectual disability.
Yeah.
And we can put.
I
the
know,
examples in.
I know, yeah, I think it's,
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, it's difficult for people to understand that it actually, very much a disability, right? Especially when you combine it with, the fact that 20% have an alternate identification as well.
And we have the option of writing in and then our categories not. Yeah, there
The
is.
disability is not listed above, please specify, yeah. Yeah, but it does seem a little odd that it's not there at all, given it is a exceptionality that the board supports.
Yeah, the intellectual disability is the exceptionality, and then we'll put the examples. in front.
The secretary.
Yeah, I just, in my head, I would, when we discussed this last meeting, I would use the term disability.
Yeah.
I think that's just a person.
Yeah. All right, I guess, are we? You know, do we approve this at this point?
I just want to go to this point.
Yeah.
Right? Because it does sit under the intellectual disability, but giftedness is not a disability, it's an exceptionality.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different.
If you elaborate, what does this mean in brackets?
Yeah. If you do that, actually.
I think that category would be selected if people were sure that they were properly reflected.
I think it's gonna be interesting to see sort of how that is perceived, right? Because it does pose a lot of challenges for these kids. That is often misunderstood. I think that's part of the problem, is there's often a big misunderstanding around the challenges that kind of, is what poses. Yeah, Donna, go ahead.
I was gonna say, there are people that will choose neurodivergent, right? Because, you know, and it, because, I know for a fact, there's a few people now that are really don't like the words and have said intellectual disability, and I prefer neurodivergent. So I think you'll get a variety of people when they come, but it's from their perspective. I think it's really important to hear what our parents are identifying their child as.
See, I know there's speaking from the, you know, the gifted community, I mean, a lot of gifted parents see their children, a lot of gifted children and adults see themselves as neurodivergent, which is an interesting.
We had the same regulation with autism.
Yeah.
So when adults were telling us what they wanted, they had a child who was autistic. And when these children grew up and had a voice, they were like, I got autism.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, exactly, right? And then you combine that because a lot of children with autism, adults with autism are also, you know, I don't want to say disproportionately, but commonly intellectually gifted at the same time. It's actually probably the largest alternate identification a gifted child will have is autism, and followed closely by ADHD, right? So it really is a bit of a divergence, a neurodivergency as opposed to an intellectual disability. So
I think that's why it's also important that there's an ability to group multiple as well.
yeah. Yeah. So with the clarification, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just saying, like, based off the title, the top part, like, it's not, like, it's allowing you to choose all that, like, what you.
Oh, the plot.
Yeah, like, it's embedded in that, so.
Yeah.
Kind of helps with guiding further.
Yeah. So are we wanting then the intellectual disability category to be defined then a little bit more? So, yeah.
I'm just wondering, would it work instead to say intellectual exceptionality and then define that as giftedness or disability?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, you know, we do refer to exceptionalities as opposed to disabilities in a lot of the areas. Yeah, that's one frame of ministry.
If we say intellectual exceptionality, it's the only one that flips from identity-based to ministry categories. Because the exceptionalities are more the headers from the ministry in terms of the categorizations. And for some of the individuals under intellectual disability, kind of the two tips of the normative scale, having that term is really important. And we have heard it from some of our gifted learners in terms of their uniqueness from those that sit adjacent to them on the normative curve and how they are unique and different.
Yeah, I don't, we determined that perhaps not the majority answering this, but I think if it said intellectual disability and then in brackets defined that, I would select that. Otherwise, I would have said no, none of these, unless changing the bottom one that says their disability is not listed. If that was changed to exceptionality, then I would have checked that for giftedness, but with the word disability, I would not have checked. So, just, okay.
What if we did the brackets?
Yeah.
Kept it as intellectual disability.
Yeah.
Added the 3 brackets per the ministry category. And then where it is in the write-in option at the bottom, state disability / exceptionality is not listed as, but please specify, and then that to me captures. Hopefully everybody would see themselves reflected somewhere in there, an opportunity to express it.
Okay.
Also,
I had a question about number 14. And I guess the ones that follow that have the lighter 1 to 5 scale. I'm just wondering what does that, how is that set up digitally? Is it like a line that they just check somewhere on the line, or are there actual numerical choices? And if there are numerical choices, I just wonder whether or not we could also label the number 2s and the number 4. I'm just worried that someone might not understand, what does 2 mean? Does it mean I'm a little uncomfortable? Does it mean I'm okay? You know, I just wondered if we could label all of the numbers, unless it's set up as a bar where they just check on the bar.
We're just gonna take.
we're just working through it.
Sure.
When you go through the actual survey itself, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like, no, listed, yeah.
Okay. But just with 1, 3, and 5 given a.
No, I had very satisfied, somewhat satisfied.
Okay.
So it may just have been the way it printed out with the
Okay.
Word document.
Yeah, I'm just, was very certain.
Sorry. Okay, so all 5 are listed. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I'm just curious, because it's not at all comfortable, somewhat
Usually
comfortable.
development teams.
It's like,
Physical
This is about my
disability.
child whose major issue is like a seizure disorder.
Yeah.
Physical, you call that physical.
Yeah. Well, and that's what they're, if it was, medical and physical impacting their learning, that would be the category of exceptionality as well. So
Disability.
It's, yeah, up on your feet, but and head dropping feet, still physical disability?
to do with the body, unless it fell under developmental disability. Usually like a lot of conversation with family to determine where they want that to fall.
Because usually if okay, so I am layman for physical disability, I'm looking for somebody, you know, a walker, a wheelchair. That's 13.
Yes, we considered something with the body impacting on learning and requiring.
But it's not the
Like even
parents of those.
Yeah, significant.
Who knows that already, that category already.
And weeks then to.
See, because I've been on
an
issue or just.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, the conversation over here is around, medically fragile children and whether that's reflected in this list, whether physical disability would cover something like, would a parent see a child who has seizures, see them as have physical disability, something to do with the body or not?
I think you're thinking as a parent, what would a parent write? And that's where we have to actually look at that and say, well, they actually check that box? I mean, we see it that way, or the government might put it in this character, but if you're looking at this box, but if you're asking the everyday parent, do they look at their child and see them as this? I'm just thinking of 2 specific children. I had one child with seizure disorders and they were dependent on every meal they applied.
And then I had another one who was on 80 feet of oxygen tube and running all over the childcare. That parent with the oxygen tube would not have classified her child as physically. Because she took a year and a half to teach it longer. Right? So I just want to make sure it's captured somewhere. And I'm not even sure like how much of our population is affected by growing number.
So we could either add it, I mean, when we were at list 19, like the previous list.
Yeah.
There was no concern raised about families not seeing themselves in there.
Right.
But if we're expanding it to be fully inclusive, we could always add it.
I think number 19, the parents will be familiar with that from their.
Yeah,
Their
IPRC.
Yeah, IPRC meetings, yeah.
So we'd like to see it added,
Maybe we just need another bracket under
Yeah.
the physical.
including.
Including, yeah, you're right,
Yeah.
another sort of defining part.
And it helps you teach the families what the documents mean within the school board as well.
Yeah, there's the term episodic disability, which I think seizures would fall under. I don't know whether that could be one of the definitions next to physical disability, but it's falls under that category. I think parents would know what that means.
All right. I guess the question now is, if with those changes being made, are we ready to approve the survey as it is with those changes? If we are, we need a motion to approve the survey. Tara, seconded, Rowan, all in favor? All right. Okay, perfect. So we'll move to, we'll move to translation services into data. In here. Okay? Yay.
Well, that's, yeah.
And I make
Well done.
one more comment about language impairment. It's a language impairment / developmental language disorder, then e.g. speech, sound production, voice disorder, dyslexia, stuttering. So technically, you've described things that aren't language. So maybe, but like including, so that you know that it's the language stuff, but we're also putting speech under this, just
Fair. We'll also chase that back from where else this list is and add that in.
Okay. Moving on then, to 10B, which is the Ministry Advisory Committee on Special Education, the feedback form. And we're gonna try and quickly complete it here. We have it up on the screen, but Donna's gonna explain what it is.
So, basically, Maxie, or basically, and it's actually, it's council, not committee. But it's administrative, the Provincial Ministry Advisory Council on Special Education, Maxie, basically has a form, and they actually sent it to the Ontario Public School Board, and who sent it to us to get completed. And I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity for SEAC to fill out. But the purpose of the form is for Maxie to obtain targeted feedback on current issues, challenges, and successful practices. So I just listed plain language transition planning guide under successful practices, just so you know. Challenges affecting education sector to support discussion of the next Maxie meeting. So this is for feedback so they're supposed to discuss the next meeting. The information will help inform policy and program decisions. Please note that the input from the various constituencies basically will be shared to the branches of the Ministry of Education. We're also gathering all this information because we do have there is an OPSCA rep, but there's also there's an intellectual disability rep, there's whatever. But so we've decided, there's three basically main categories: current emerging issues affecting students with special needs, successful practices to support students with special needs, with education needs, challenges and possible solutions, and then other comments. So there was 4 categories that they're basically looking for input. first opportunity to get the information from this.
Okay, so what's our first category?
Current and emerging
Issues affecting, current and emerging issues affecting students with special needs.
All right. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that section? What do we have in there? Do you have anything?
No, I rapid transition guide.
Okay.
Yeah, I already, the transition guide, I've already added that into, successful practice.
Current and emergent affecting, so I would say some of the current and emerging issues are the fact that many, like, you know, for example, Durham's a growth board, right? And our funding is lagging well behind even the 2018 census data. So sort of the emerging side of that is the distance between funding and need is growing. Right, it's growing because you've got kids coming in who aren't being accounted for because we're using, and I know there's a move to, you know, slowly, you know, increase that to the 2018 census data, but then we're still already 7 years behind that. So by the time they get there,
So we're gonna be in 10 years.
we're gonna be 10 years behind, right? So that gap is continuous growing and Durham is only growing. It's so. That's an issue. Tara?
I think we mentioned around the table before, John, I'm pretty sure you have as well, but just the whole concept of the full baseline amount, or like the minimum amount. That it doesn't matter the size of the board, it's the same amount for everybody. And you're, what is the second largest board in Ontario?
Sixth largest growth, fastest growing, but we're still, I think we're almost hitting 5 though. We're kind of catching up.
Yeah, so we're on the larger scale, in the, you know, and the largest. So you have so many more children serve and students to service with the same base amount as a board that has quite a large number of fewer students. Like, should there be a scaling of base given the total population that you're serving, you know, those sorts of things. So that kind of idea as well, just saying, it is not equal service that needs to be provided as well. It's not necessarily that level of recognition from that.
Anybody else?
I think one of the things that, you know, we don't want to just mention funding, but I think that, you know, as we are a growing board, the needs within our community are growing, and our community partners are also facing challenges to support our growing community, because and the complex care needs that are required as well.
And I would actually tap into our letter that we just wrote to the College of Teachers, right? Because unless mandated by the ministry, professional development is optional, right? You can't say you have to take this course, you have to take that course unless it's mandated specifically by the ministry. And the reality is the classrooms of today have a variety of needs. It is imperative that teachers get the professional development to allow them to effectively work with that sort of broad spectrum of students. So that's something that maybe the ministry has to start looking at. If we're talking making sure that our kids aren't falling behind without proper understanding, right, to provide the supports. So.
Part of how we got on wheel.
Yeah.
The direct versus indirect support. We all know that direct support in the finding rate of the classroom is very marginalized for most families. And they're relying on the teacher to be able to have the knowledge base to apply the needs that usually would come under specialized education.
Ask, they're getting it.
we'll turn this back around.
Okay, successful practices to support students with special education needs. I think what you mentioned, the transition.
Yeah.
See laptops for students from grade 7 to 12. So the laptops for students from grade 7 to 12, every one of them getting them has been one of the single biggest things this school board has done for inclusion. Because those kids who had the SEAC laptops, it's imperative that they use them, do not now feel out of place using them, because all of the students are using them. And I know with my youngest daughter, that was key. She wouldn't touch it until everybody got one. And then she was no longer that kid. So
I was gonna just add to that, and also, because we mentioned this around the table was brought forward, and it actually allows some of our students to actually become the leaders because they've been successful in using the technology longer. So I think that's really important to say that it actually, you know, promotes leadership.
puts them into a leadership role.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else have any that they need to do? I mean, I think there's a lot of policies and procedures that we have in place that are quite good, but,
One, the cooking competition with the
Yes.
Ontario skills.
Yeah, Ontario skills has got to be mentioned.
yes,
It was-
110%, yeah.
I still smile, like, thinking about that.
The, track and field,
Yeah.
the track and field day.
Next one is challenges and possible solutions.
Challenges and possible solutions.
I can share one. We have we're experiencing an increase in partners locally, supporting congregate living for students that have behavioral challenges and or intellectual disability needs. And we've recently, Connor and I just recently met with one of our partners that we were having a bit of our two processes for intake and planning weren't driving consistently. And so we were able to sit down based on building good relationships and centering on youth to actually map our two processes and find where there's greater opportunity for connection and centering family voice in transition planning and early information sharing, which again goes back to trust building. So really, if you're accessing real estate, that's when you start talking to us, not when you start having individual students, because then we can start prepping from our side. And so I think one of the challenges is the disconnect between the ministries and planning for students that have, and Donna, you said it really, really well, complex care needs. And so what the other side of that is where there's a commitment to relationship, just as you explained at your school, we're able to build trusted relationships to share information in a way that builds stronger systems for kids and families.
That's really good, and I think we could tie that back to the K to 12 sort of recommendations as far as like some of this stuff we can, the plain language, as noted in, you know, I really would, and one of the things that's the challenges that is that there's a document sitting out there that has over 200 recommendations. This board here has, because everybody around the table and then keep on informing and stuff like that. Staff have started to implement things even beforehand. And that's the thing, is that recognizing that those recommendations can be implemented without having to really wait for ministry documentation or changes to legislation or whatever. And I think that that's really key, and that is that, you know, because changes in legislation really need to be done, which is a challenge, because some of the challenges that we do have around different agencies and different government is because of legislation, right? So it's that coordinated approach that needs to happen when we're basically centered focus on the support of the student.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges is getting, reports from studies that are done implemented. I think that's a big challenge, right? Like, the solution is to actually take that document that's been sitting there for, what are yours? Or I was gonna say, was it 2021, I guess, yeah. When, we went through that painstakingly, and, a few of us gave a lot of time in the summer to this sort of stuff, right? So. Let's talk. We don't see a fourth, we see three. Oh, here's one.
Oh, the other one was other comments. It's on the, other comments is on the back, any additional comments. So that was it. There's three main categories.
Oh, other comments, okay. Any
So-
other comments?
So one of my comments that I reflect on DDSB is that they're ready to take action. So when we find a solution, we don't anchor on that solution for months and months of discussion. For example, our listening sessions that we're now going to be marketed to all schools. But I've also like to add that I think that some listening session brief should happen for the administrators who are running these, so that they can talk about what skills they do need, what they don't need, what's going well, how did you do that? What happened when you had an angry parent trying to take over the whole meeting? So action, let's say in our culture, action, right? So the action.
Okay. Donna, okay. So you
I'm
got
gonna in your inbox. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's great, because, yeah, we share that, but, what we can do is actually still share this, and if anybody thinks about, I know, I'm having a meeting on the 12th of February. So, if anybody else wanted to add something that they thought would be great, so I think it probably could share that document with everybody. And then if they have any further information, that would be great.
Awesome. All right,
By Thursday, so that you have it.
yeah, by Thursday, okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to association reports and committee reports. Any association or committee reports, Jen?
Yes, I went to the PIC meeting at the end of last month. They had some really good topics that they discussed. They spoke about a new program that they're gonna be implementing for the grade 7s and 8s, transitioning to high school, and I'm saying, oh my son just missed that program. So they're having a group of child and youth workers, different resources, special teachers to help these students navigate and transition into high school, and I think that's a good thing. They've also started to focus on, this was the first I've been hearing about this, the 30 credits my way, which is actually very autonomous for the high school kids, giving them a sense of independence so they can do the courses with very different options, so they could take different level courses at the same time as long as they have prerequisites. So most of the course selection, they don't really need the emphasis on the guidance counselors helping them and providing different pathways for them to get those 30 credits, which was also good. They also spoke about bringing in another mental health speaker, because they have a different set up series for the speakers, and we've been having some individual speakers coming in to speak. The last one they had was a guy last week that spoke about resilience, how he was in a special ed classroom when he was just in the school system, and he had different mentors along the way, and he excelled and graduated from university, and is now giving back to the community. Awesome. And the next meeting is May 27th.
Any questions for Jen with respect to PIP? Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just want to ask about the series. So yeah, how are those set up? Is that this like the same as last year, the series for parents in the individual schools? Can you just expand on that?
They have a subcommittee that chooses the speakers, And, yes, they go to different schools. Most of the speakers up there have been online actually. But I'm going to, since I've been new to the committee, there wasn't much of an opportunity for me to give feedback towards the speakers, but my feedback would be, I don't think a lot of the parents are aware of the speaker series, but if I wasn't involved in the paper, I wouldn't know that they had these speaker series that.
We've actually got really good attendance in the past.
Yeah, we have. The attendance was good, but a lot of the parents still are not aware of the speaker series. Because if I wasn't in the big meetings, I would not know that they were speaker series. So I just think it would be a good resource for a lot of other parents to tap into. That's all.
But my question, I wonder how they're circulating it, because I know I used to get the information all the time as a SEC chair. But, and they would be, I know it would show up on like their Facebook feed and Twitter and things like that.
Last year, they were pushing it through their emails, don't know who is that.
Yeah, I get a direct email from them.
Okay, is it a direct email?
So that doesn't mean that,
Okay.
to get.
Yeah, no, for sure, there's, you get the junk, there's lots of things that could happen, for sure. But just trying to figure out the variety of ways. Because I know you don't want to overuse the robocall system. But, depending on the service, that is another thing. Yeah, Donna?
My only comment is because it's funny because I make a note on the speakers, and a lot of times I might not register or whatever, but I make a note and then oh yeah, it's on tonight, whatever. And then when I go to the board site to look for the link, it's gone already because it's happening that day. And I think that it's gotta stay there until after the event. Cause it's gone, and then I have to search through my emails and stuff like that, and I might get it, I might not. So it's funny because it really is, that don't eliminate it until after.
Well, I think there should also be like how ours are on the YouTube page for later reviewing,
Yeah.
that they could possibly consider that.
According to someone. We do have the option of having the 30 credits my way, having it as a presentation in May to SEAC. If we'd like to do that. We can put that forward.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions for Jen? Okay. All right. Moving on then to correspondence. In the package, you saw my response to the DDSB for the Ottawa Catholic District School Board, their SEAC, the one where they wanted us to sign on to the letter. So I received an email back. I think they might have had some other SEACs that had the similar concerns to us, because they then drafted another letter, which was circulated today. It was a little bit more generalized. Right now, I think it's kind of premature right now, because we're in the middle of an election. We don't even know who the Minister of Education is going to be. There's nobody there who's going to read it at the moment. It'd be a waste of time to send it, only to have it sit in somebody's desk. So I think we should possibly bring it forward for actual review at the next SEAC meeting, which Tara will be chairing that one. But I've also sent to Lisa a track changes version, because the way the one, if I was gonna sign on to it, I feel like it wasn't written to a standard that our letters seem to be are accustomed to, right? Like it's hard to explain, but it just didn't flow very well, and it wasn't clear on what the point was in certain areas. So I've done some track changes to it that I would like you guys to consider, and maybe you guys have suggestions on that as well. We bring it forward at the next meeting and have that discussion about whether we sign on to it if they were willing to revise the letter, essentially. Because I feel like if we're putting our name to it, it needs to reflect our SEAC as well, right, so. Okay, so if we can move that forward to, I think, the next agenda, and we'll recirculate the week before those two letters, if people could try to review them before the SEAC meeting itself. And then we received a response to our Ontario College of Teachers, and actually it was a pretty good response. I don't know, Alice,
I didn't like
I mean,
it.
if you didn't.
I thought she
Yeah.
deliberately went around, we were really specific that we were talking about pre-service
Right,
teacher education. Her response was all about, we can't mandate AQ courses, but we weren't talking about AQ courses.
I think that was her response to the previous letter, not to our letter. our
It
letter-
says, dear Eva.
Or in her email, because there was the other letter that she sent, so she, just gonna sort of pull it up here. Where, so they gave us they sent us the response that they get sent to Limestone District School Board in November. And then to ours, but I think what was interesting in ours is they had these draft guidelines and feedback form, they reopened it.
I saw that, yeah.
To receive feedback, and that's where I was wondering whether either one of you wanted to provide that, to go into that link and provide the feedback. Because I feel like you guys have quite a bit of knowledge there.
Charmaine, did you have the same impression about, I just felt like she was answering a question that we didn't ask. She was talking
Yeah.
about AQ courses and we were talking
Yeah,
about pre-service teacher education. I would
Right.
happily go in and say that and that feedback.
Yeah.
That we're talking about initial teacher education, not additional qualification.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, I probably missed that because I don't have background in that, but yeah, no. But I thought that it was interesting because it sounds like they reopened the link. So that was, I thought was quite good.
Well, we can go in if, want us to go in and then add what we were originally, our ask was, we can do that.
Yeah, and whatever their yeah, I don't know if they'll have specific questions or not. for
Yeah,
us to
they do,
provide
so I've done
feedback.
that before, so.
Yeah.
It looks like.
But if you guys wanna tackle that,
Sure.
that would be fantastic. And then we received a letter to us from the near north, talking about board efficiencies, which were essentially whether or not it made sense to continue with sort of 4 boards, so there's the public board, the Catholic, the English public board, English Catholic board, the French public board, the French Catholic board. And I think their letter is saying, get rid of that, and have 1 board.
We'll have it, well, and that, what they specifically said, they didn't say that, is that to look at the 4 structures and whether they can, the ministry to look at efficiencies, that's what it said, it didn't say to eliminate it.
Yes.
They were very, very clear on that, and it was just, it was interesting because, yeah. But it was interesting, but the motion didn't say eliminate, it said to look at the efficiencies between the 4, right? And the ministry should look at that.
So,
But how do you read that, Anna?
yeah, how do you read that? Okay.
I'm not gonna say.
I was gonna say the language.
The language says is to
talk about
look at the
efficiencies.
efficiencies
Yeah.
between the 4 boards, that's all I'm saying. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna get into that.
I mean, I don't know that this is something that SEAC is a SEAC issue, to be quite frank, so I don't see us responding to it in any way, shape or form. I mean, you can have a debate whether you agree with the separate funding or not, but it's a different table, yeah, it's a very much.
I think from a special education point of view is that many of the coterminous boards, other than smaller boards, do not have small class placements. And where, we do, and I think that's one of the biggest issues is that, we anecdotally, I know I've heard And, you know, I keep on referring back to when I was first elected, that I could, you know, I had several calls where parents who were in the elementary, particularly the elementary system, and then were told that they should, you know, go to the public board because they didn't have the small class sizes, didn't have the supports, and I said that was, I said anecdotally, that's just phone calls that I received, and that, I did, you know, I don't know what the statistics are from that perspective at all. But I mean, and you have some boards that have some boards, I think I mentioned last time, where we have the boards that eliminated all small class placements, and they went mainstream, and then they found that that didn't particularly work in the secondary, and so they reintroduced small class placements for the secondary system at that point in time. So again, it comes down to, you know, funding and how it's given, because one of the biggest things is that when we talk about funding, we always say we don't have enough, and they say, well, you choose what programs you offer. And if they're more expensive, that's your choice. That's commonly what's said. And we've increased special education funding, but it's your choice to offer those programs. So, you know, again, you know, and the fact that, you know, the first placement is offered as mainstream, right? And my whole concern though, too, if you're looking at challenges, is that and I mentioned it last time about school authorities whose budgets haven't been approved. You know, the previous school year's budget didn't get approved until April. And how can you plan to support complex care needs students when you haven't got a budget? And then, you know, for increasing, if there's an increased number of students, and but budgets aren't being increased either. And if you think about, you know, the complex care, medical needs, et cetera, that these students have increased costs, you know, and their budgets are increased, which further then says, okay, well, how do we support those, you know, school authorities? How do we further support those students? And maybe we can move a student into, you know, a system faster, as you know, a regular school board faster, and that's concerning to me as well. So I mean, there's all the things, you know, I look at concerns. You know, one of the concerns again is that, you know, again, we have our school authorities who are not getting increased funding with the increased number of complex care needs of students, right? And they have to handle. So, I mean, there are things when it comes to, you know, coordination of services, you know, it would be a lot better. You know, the example that you gave would be, you know, as far as partnerships and so forth, and allowing that to happen. But when you have the four systems, it's like they do their own thing, we do our own thing. So is there an efficiency to ensure that everybody has the same amount of services? You know, we also talk about that when it comes to working on it, when it comes to our dual program schools and supports, particularly around French immersion. Ensuring that our students who have, you know, different learning needs can be accommodated in French, because it wasn't being done previously. It was like, oh, they can't, you know, they can't stay in the French immersion, we'll put them back into the English stream. So we as a board, but again, it's an individual thing. And so, you know, we've got to look at as different boards, they all deal with all these issues differently. Yeah. So can there be some efficiencies that improve student achievement, that improve equity as far as across for all learning systems?
Anybody else have any comments on the correspondence? Okay. We're not thinking though that we need to.
No, I'm just saying
Okay,
that, you know,
I just want to make sure that I'm not.
no, I'm just saying from a, you know,
that, but
it's a limited perspective, but I'm just saying.
yeah, sure, it's a
food for
limited,
thought.
yeah, it is a limited perspective, but. Okay, moving on then to number 13, community concerns. Does anybody have any community concerns to bring up at the moment? Sharmeen?
Not a concern, but maybe an ask. I'm just gonna read it because this email just came to me recently, so, I don't know if those around the table are aware that some teachers for the visually impaired are few and far between and, across all boards across the province. And so many students who are blind or visually impaired within our system are not getting the support that, they require from teachers who have special, expertise and training, and skill sets within that. And part of that is because there's very limited resources for a teacher to get that training to be able to offer that service. So CNIB is now seeking parents to share their TVI, teacher visually impaired, contact information, because they are now setting up regular meetings with those teachers and professional development for those teachers as a way of providing support, including a retreat at their Lake Joe, which is actually phenomenal, so I'm jealous already that they might be going there. So basically trying to create a network where there is no network amongst TVIs to be able to share resources. And going back to like what Donna was just sharing, how do we streamline, building capacity, but then how do we streamline, like what one board, for instance, I worked at York Regional District School Board, but my children were at dorm board. And so when we were looking for services for them, I went to my board because I had access to find out, hey, what's available. But then when I went to my children's school and say, okay, well, I want my child to have this and that, and this and this. And they're like, oh, we don't have, we don't do that here. We don't have those resources, or we don't use MacBooks here. So we can't get an iPad for your child. Like all of these barriers came up and I'm like, okay, so why is that board doing all of this? And that really was just about the capacity of that, the leadership at that time and the TVIs and the skills and the servicing that they were getting, professional development they were getting. So I was just wondering if it's possible to get the contact of maybe the lead of the TVIs to be able to share. Can I share that information with CNIB so that they can share out that information once it becomes available?
Michelle leads that team.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So that would be great. And then, so Michelle leads the team, as the system lead. And then this year we actually have a team lead. Because we put a lead in place for both teachers of blind, low vision and teachers of deaf, hard of hearing, noting the specialty training and experience that they bring and just bringing in different leadership to mentoring those new to the team. Because as you said, there's a gap in where they can access that. And so just building leadership within the team. And so Michelle and Ange can share that with the rest of the team, and we're happy to have the team registered.
So I should contact Michelle.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Or if you have a sentence, Lisa, or
Lisa. Okay.
add that.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
All right. Anything else? Any other community concerns? I don't specifically have a community concern. I had a great conversation with Mom about a week or so ago. There was some issues where Andrew and I had some discussions behind the scenes, and that's privacy reasons that will stay between Andrew and I. But you know, the biggest part that came to me out of this whole conversation that I had with this mom was very similar to what Tara and Joe were experiencing with that table, is having somebody who listened, who understood the concerns, who could empathize and share sort of some ideas, some suggestions, you know, providing some helpful hints and giving that mom a sense of a broader community. So I guess that could be a celebration of success and slash sort of a community, started out as a community concern sort of, and then moved on to more of a celebration of success to say, you know, Mom felt by the end of the conversation that she had been heard, and you know, I followed up with her by email, let her know about my conversation with Andrea, and that made her feel, you know, that that her voice was being heard, sort of in a broader way, which I think is really important to have. So there's that. Anybody else have any celebrations or successes? Yeah.
It is Black History Month.
Yes, it is. It is.
And You know, 2025 is starting with a bang, so there's like things falling out of the sky, there's like threats happening from our neighboring countries. We are in a time of uncertainty. And in my spiritual system, we are in the lunar cycle of Guru, which reminds us that we have the right to choose how we respond to any challenge in life. And that our natural way of being is through peace. And we cannot make action with the other emotions because they reduce your logic. So I chose a quote from Rosa Parks. And Rosa Parks said, I had no idea that history was being made. I was just tired of giving up. So I want us to remember here around the table the ways in which we don't give up. Through our listening sessions, through our transition teams, through our parent feedback surveys, through our 30 My Way, we are not giving up around this table. We are making it share.
You know what, I'll add to that. I was asked today by a former VP that was at my kid's high school. You're still doing SEAC? You're still doing this? And I said, yeah, because it's really important work. Right? It matters. So.
I'll look at that, I'm allowed to say, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can say that.
I do not have an Adam story, I have a James story.
Okay.
So, which had cats in this whole thing. So I volunteered for CADS, which is the Canadian Adapted Sports programs that we are talking about at Brimble. And my youngest, James, is officially a volunteer this year. So we call ourselves Meat Shields. Our job is to block other skiers from hitting our athletes and our instructors and things like that. It's basically just gently guiding people away from us, that sort of thing. Last couple of weeks, my youngest has been leading a little bit. So we actually have skiers anywhere from who are sitting, in the sit ski, the wheelchair on skis, to they're fully capable of skiing on their own, and they're actually practicing and getting skills and stuff. So James is actually leading some of these skiers down the hill. So they have the instructors that they're going to work on a skill. So he's going and demonstrating what's going on and doing that. And they love him. I don't know what it is about him, but I'm just so proud of him. Okay. Seeing tissues. And that he is loving this, which is, this normal teenage boy who doesn't care about the world and, everything is an eye roll that you can hear from the next room over sometimes, right? But the fact that he is super enjoying this and is getting something out of it and is helping these kids and they're gravitating to him, like some of these is like the two people they works with actually asked if he was gonna work with them next week. That's the kind of thing that kind of don't you hurt. So I was like really super proud of him for that. So it's a fantastic program. I cannot say enough about this CADS program. It's allowing it that accessibility and equity and visibility. Like we got these fantastically lime green jackets this year. There's 30 plus of us on the hill with these things. So we're coming. So it's phenomenal to sort of see it. Like I get such a kick out of going down like the Black Diamond run underneath the chairlift with following behind one of these sit skis, one of the kids that I work with, he loves going fast and it terrifies me half the time, but I'm going and you're just watching people go, just pointing at this thing, this contraption going down the hill, and then you get conversations on the chairlift top or sitting at the top. What's that? How's that going? And then it's really great when it's other parents, not part of the group that are actually answering the questions. So that it's normalizing that, which I can't say enough about. So that was my big thing this month. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Absolutely awesome. Anybody else? Our next meeting is scheduled for March 20th, 2025, right here. Motion to adjourn. Allison, all in favor? Everybody's hand goes up like that.
Now we will. Sorry.